Hurricane Helene is prompting back-to-back WRAL weather alert days when the worst winds and rain move in town by town, and the historic flooding that could happen in the North Carolina mountains.
Plus, a tropical storm warning issued for parts of North Carolina. The preparations happening now to protect areas in the triangle that easily flood. And a Kerry doctor risking his life to save others in Gaza.
I wasn't completely prepared for some of the violence that I saw.
New at 7, how he's describing the emotional experience working in a war zone. Here we go. Hurricane Helene churns through the Gulf of Mexico tonight. On the left is the storm's forecasted track. On the right, video from Mexico, where they are seeing its bands.
This could get as strong as a Category 4 hurricane, and its remnants are set to impact our area. That's why tomorrow and Friday has been marked as a WRAL Weather Alert Day. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dan Haggerty.
And I'm Ashley Rowe. The North Carolina mountains could be among the hardest hit areas. A tropical storm warning has been issued for that area. Governor Roy Cooper has declared a state of emergency. His team will share updates tomorrow at 11 a.m. As for impacts here in the Triangle, the IBMA Bluegrass Live Street Festival is postponed until 5 p.m. Friday.
And meteorologist Kat Campbell tracking all of this for us and knows what to expect next from this storm, Kat.
Well, we expect rapid intensification to begin later tonight. That's going to be ongoing up until the storm about makes landfall tomorrow evening in the Big Bend area around Florida. So this is a very large storm that I wanted to point out. A lot of thunderstorms firing up around the center of it. Category 4 top winds 130 miles per hour by tomorrow afternoon. So it strengthens quickly over the warm water. It is going to veer a bit to the west after that. That really does not affect the impacts to the North Carolina mountains. They are still expecting major flooding. And check out the size of this storm. The tropical storm force wind field could be about 400 miles. So that's going to be well outside the cone. And that's why I want to stress the impacts from Helene are going to be big across much of the southeast. Even if you're not in the cone, you're still likely to be impacted. A tropical storm warning was issued for the North Carolina mountains, and that does include most of South Carolina, I think all of South Carolina now, as well as the Charlotte area. Even hurricane warnings extend pretty far inland in Georgia. So let's talk about the timing. Flooding threats already ongoing in the mountains tonight due to a cold front, but here's Helene, and that's going to start to bring those intense rain bands to western North Carolina tomorrow. We see that chance ramping up late in the day tomorrow, but especially very early Friday morning. This rain band is probably going to be the most impactful one for us to watch. That'll move through Friday morning and last into the early afternoon hours, and that's when we could also see some gusty winds. As for rain totals, they have come down in our viewing area today, 1 to 2 inches, maybe some totals close to 3, but our ground's already saturated, and some strong winds gusting to about 40 miles per hour. I'll have a closer look at what the mountains should see town by town coming up.
Okay, Kat, and we want to get a look at how our area is preparing for this storm. WRAL's Aaron Thomas joins us now live near Crabtree Creek in Raleigh. Aaron, this is an area prone to flooding.
Yeah, that's right, Ashley. In fact, I'm taking a look right behind me and I can see some of these fast moving waters, and I'm looking at 2 different trees here. You can see where the water line can go up. In fact, it was just last month that we were in this area, and part of this trail that you see a lot of people use for biking and as well as running and walking, a lot of it was submerged underwater due to the impacts from Tropical Storm Debbie. We want to show you video from a different side of Crabtree Creek that was also underwater. We saw several cars that were parked in parking lots that were partially submerged because of the impacts of Tropical Storm Debbie. We see a lot of fast moving flood waters as a result of these fast moving storms. Another popular area known for flooding, that's Atlantic Avenue as well as Millbrook Road. Of course, it causes a headache for drivers when those roads have to close. Tonight we caught up with NCDOT to talk about some of their efforts to ensure safety on the roads.
We are making sure the grates and drains on our interstates are clear of debris so that when we do get that heavy rain, whoever sees it, water can drain quickly. So that's the chance of hydroplaning.
And the same goes for City of Raleigh, who's also monitoring the impacts of the storm to reduce any chances of hydroplaning and a lot of flooding on the roadways. Aaron Thomas, WRAL News, live in Raleigh.
And from the WRAL Live Center, we're keeping our eyes on the North Carolina mountains. A live look right now from Asheville at the Omni Grove Park Inn. And one of the big concerns here is the rain they're already seeing. There's already a flood watch in effect for the mountains because of that rain. And as you add the rain that we're expecting from Hurricane Helene onto that in the coming days, take a look at this official forecast. This is for the French Broad River at Asheville. Friday night at 8 o'clock, they're calling for a crest of 16.5 feet. That would be the third highest crest on record at the French Broad River. But take a look at this. Just upstream on the French Broad at Fletcher, the forecast calls for 22 feet late Friday night. That would beat the record of 20 feet.
My goodness. All right. Thank you for that update, Brian. The father of the teenager accused in the Hedingham shooting pleaded guilty today to a gun charge. Alan Thompson was charged with a misdemeanor for failing to secure a gun in his home. Thompson accepted responsibility and was in tears for nearly the entire hearing.
Alan Thompson is living the unthinkable. He has lost both his sons, and he may never know why this happened.
The 9mm gun found in the shed where Austin Thompson was hiding belonged to his father. It was kept in his nightstand unlocked. It's not clear if that was the gun used in that shooting rampage. 5 people died, including Thompson's other son, James. Safe gun storage is the subject of our WRAL documentary, Unsafe. WRAL documentary reporter Kristen Severance talked with several families whose lives were changed forever because of unsecured guns. You can watch that now on WRALdoc.com.
More Mark Robinson fallout, a huge sinkhole, and a deputy sentenced to 6 years in prison. Here are 5 things you should know right now. Top members of Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson's state office have resigned. Sources tell the WRAL Capitol Bureau that 4 senior employees are stepping down just days after a CNN report claiming Robinson made graphic comments on a porn site. 8 campaign staffers resigned over the weekend. Still, Robinson denies the claims. We asked his campaign for a comment on this story. They did not respond. The new 18-mile section of the 540 toll road opened this morning. It extends the Triangle Expressway from Highway 55 to I-40. Get this, within just the first few hours of it opening, WRAL News captured the moment a car was seen traveling the wrong way. We called officials for assistance. DOT urges drivers to check out the new route on a map before hitting the road. All that rain overnight opened up a huge sinkhole in Person County. DOT says it's at least 25 feet deep. This is on Long Avenue in Roxborough. DOT says a drainage pipe collapsed and it could take at least a month to fix. A retired Wayne County deputy will spend 6 years in federal prison for drug trafficking charges. Michael Cox worked for the sheriff's office for more than 20 years, retiring in 2018. Investigators say that he used his position as head of the department's drug unit to support his own drug habits. They say he had plans to sell cocaine, meth, oxycodone, and marijuana. Cox pleaded guilty to several charges in March. And both presidential campaigns spent more time in North Carolina today. Former President Donald Trump spoke in Mint Hill near Charlotte. Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff was in Wilmington, stumping for his wife, Vice President Kamala Harris.
Tonight is part 2 of our coverage on the unique perspectives from the war in Gaza. I spoke to a doctor from Kerry who spent multiple weeks there treating victims.
I will openly admit that there are many nights, more often than not, when I was there during my 3-week stay, that I silently cried, just thinking about what I had seen.
In about 2 minutes, he shares stories from those hospitals after nearly a year of violence in Gaza.
Tonight, we continue our coverage of unique perspectives from the war in Gaza. Last night, we heard from Aviva Siegel. Hamas held her hostage for a month. Her husband, Keith, a Chapel Hill native, remains in custody. You can find that interview on the WRAL YouTube page. Tonight, a doctor from Kerry who treated bombing victims in Gaza shares his story and those of the people who live there.
For weeks, a North Carolina doctor risked his life working in hospitals in Gaza. He worked in northern and southern Gaza as patient after patient came into the ER with only moments to save their lives in some cases. After his dangerous and emotionally exhaustive journey, he returned home to Kerry and spoke to us about his experience. I want to bring in Dr. Ayaz Patan, who spent weeks in Gaza recently, helping in emergency and triage, saving lives, witnessing the terrible cost of this war firsthand. We talked about what it was like to work in a war zone, how food was scarce. He actually lost 13 pounds just working over there over a few weeks. Bombs were exploding multiple times a day while he was working. Perhaps the most dangerous part was just moving from place to place and getting to the hospitals. I do want to start with a picture that you shared with me, and this was of an Israeli soldier at a checkpoint pointing a mounted machine gun at your vehicle while another soldier questioned your driver. You also showed me some pictures of explosions that you took with your phone. Tell me a bit about the dangers that you encountered working in a war zone.
Yeah, so I wasn't completely prepared for some of the violence that I saw, which really sounds foolish because I knew I was going into a war zone.
These roads are treacherous. Bridges are out. It is literally an active war zone. And it's not an understatement to say that a wrong turn could actually mean death.
And we were warned by the soldier that we're traveling on a road that they consider dangerous, that from this point on, nobody is going to check our credentials. They're not going to check that we are doctors. They're not going to check that we are Americans. They're not going to check our passports. His exact words were that if you slow down, if you go too fast, if you turn off of this road, you will be targeted as a threat. And what I'll say is that our driver, who is from Gaza, who's made this trip many, many times, you could tell the anxiety on his face and his actions, that he held our lives in his hand based on how he was driving, the roads that he was staying on. So I'll tell you, that was one time that I really felt that this could be it.
Right now, the bombings making headlines are the ones in Lebanon. More than 500 people are dead there. 50,000 people have been displaced. But of course, the bombings also continue in Gaza. Dr. Patan took a video with his phone of the moments after a bombing in the ER.
I think what was really devastating to me was the fact that that incident was repeated 3-4 times a day. The thing that would strike anybody that works in healthcare or not is the number of patients that were on the floor, right? That we did not even have enough stretchers really to be able to accommodate patients. The toughest part for me is especially when there were multiple patients, and as you know, half of the population is high school age or younger, so a lot of them are children, and having to make decisions that I would not make in this country. I would absolutely be able to get somebody to the operating room, be able to resuscitate them, give them a chance to live, but instead, in that situation, have to pull them to the corner, and in some cases, not even be able to give them pain medicine if we didn't have it. Just knowing that here, they're not going to survive, and we have another dozen patients that have a higher chance of survival that we need to really focus our resources on.
How is it that you can cope with that? Is it difficult?
Yeah, it's absolutely difficult. I will openly admit that there are many nights, more often than not, when I was there during my 3-week stay, that I silently cried, just thinking about what I had seen. And quite honestly, just the inability to do what I felt I needed to do to help the people. But I knew that in a room full of, almost a dozen other doctors that were sleeping in these bunk beds, that the vascular surgeon, the plastic surgeon, the trauma surgeon, the pediatric doctor, all of them had the same experience that very day about not being able to be good enough to do what they needed to.
It's hard to imagine that type of helplessness and suffering and fear. But Dr. Patan also witnessed perseverance and resilience. I want to ask you about 2 other photos that you sent me. One is a photo that shows 3 boys sitting in the dirt outside of a building that's damaged and charred from bombs. Only one of the 3 is even wearing shoes, and they're leaning on each other. kind of hands on each other's legs, comforting one another. The other photo shows a tent built out of rubble that looks like a market or something. They're selling food and snacks there or giving them away. In the background, there are kids standing on a collapsed building playing with what looks like a kite that I imagine they may have even made. Can you tell me about these very sad and poetic moments that you were able to capture with your phone with these photographs, and what impression that they have left on you?
Yeah, I think in the first photo, what it showed me and what I've learned is that the people are tired. They don't have resources. They don't have shoes. Quite honestly, one of the things you'll find of anybody that goes there with the humanitarian effort is you leave everything. You leave your shoes, you leave your clothes, you leave your scrubs, you leave your toothpaste, whatever you brought with you, you leave. In the second picture, I think it's a reminder of the resilience of the people. And that is something that I really sometimes feel that I took from them and they gave me. So I'd like to think that I was able to provide support, both medically, emotionally, but I think in a lot of ways they provided me with a new perspective on life. And again, seeing those kids in that type of situation and still being kids was something that really was moving for me. And it made me think about my own kids. It made me think about the situation they're in. And it really got me to get up every day and many nights to go down and help, because I thought that's what it was about, the people.
Really a remarkable person, and there are a lot of people doing that type of work. Again, he mentioned he left everything, all of his personal items there in Gaza, but he did bring this home. This was a piece of a missile shrapnel. It says it just reminds him of what's happening over there, what is going on there still now. He told me the doctors who stayed behind did tell him that now the real work begins. This is his words, that they said that now it's his job to come here and kind of share the stories of what it's like over there.
Talk about stories, right? Telling these stories from the doctors, the families of the hostages. It's about perspective. The suffering from this war is felt from many viewpoints, not in competition, but in common.
If you would like to see more coverage like this, that's what we are trying to do here at 7 o'clock on WRAL, bearing in mind the humanity behind these headlines and the politics. Kat.
And we're also monitoring the big story right now that is Hurricane Helene. We will see impacts from that system here, though we're not actually going to see the center pass over us. So let's talk about what we will see locally. Tomorrow night into the first half of the day, Friday is going to be the worst of it for us. Flooding risk is low to medium, higher for the western part of our area. The issue is the rainfall total is coming down a bit, I think closer to 1 to 2 inches, but the soil just can't take in any more water out there. Wind damage, that threat fairly low, but just keep in mind with the soil already saturated, the roots are loose on the trees. It could be easy for a few trees to come down, and some isolated tornadoes will be possible. Big picture, it's not just Helene that we are watching right now. We've got this front that's already leading to some flooding issues in the North Carolina mountains potentially tonight. We've had a extreme flood risk. This is as high of a threat as it goes in pink for a sliver of the mountains today. That threat will be expanded tomorrow, including Asheville, Boone under a high risk of flooding, Charlotte, the triad medium, and a lower in threat here in central North Carolina. A tropical storm warning is in effect for Asheville right now, much of the mountains, Charlotte, and pretty much the entire state of South Carolina. I do not think that we will be placed under a tropical storm warning in our viewing area. It just seems we're not going to be in the worst of this in terms of what we see across the state. The mountains will, unfortunately, widespread 5 to 10 inch rainfall totals, some isolated totals of 10 to 15 inches. You know, you don't want that much water on flat ground, but you add the mountainous terrain and it creates mudslides, landslides, just a mess in the mountains. This could be some historic flooding for them. And for Helene, let me go back to the winds here in the North Carolina mountains, because these are pretty impressive as well. The wind speed forecast anywhere from 50 to 70 miles per hour in some of the higher elevations. And this is likely to lead to some power outages. So I'm getting a lot of questions. It is Parents' Weekend at App State. Saturday doesn't look too bad. So if you want to go, either hold off until Friday night or check in Saturday. The issue could be some of the roads getting there, but don't leave Friday morning would be my suggestion. For Futurecast, the mountains already seeing heavy rain from that front. They'll see it through much of the day tomorrow. For us, it's going to be more scattered during the day tomorrow, but any of those thunderstorms, even though they're small on Futurecast, could have some pretty heavy rain and flooding. The more concerning band of rain is this one. That's going to swing through very early Friday morning and last into early Friday afternoon. The good news is the way it looks now, we should be drying out Friday evening and night. Saturday looks dry and hot at 86, and then we'll have some isolated storm chances Sunday through early next week. Highs stay in the 80s for the foreseeable future.
Thank you, Kat. Hey, one last thing. We told you the new section of the 540 toll road is open. How much does it cost to drive? That's after the break. One last thing we wanted to talk to you about tonight. We talked a little bit earlier about the new stretch of 540 that opened today. DOT cut the ribbons, traffic started rolling. This project cost $2.5 billion.
It wasn't cheap to build, and it won't be cheap to use. This piece of 540 is a toll road. DOT has this helpful little tool that can show you how much it'll cost to drive it. If you drive a regular old commuter car from all 36 miles of the Triangle Expressway, that's from NC 147 to the end of the new expansion, it'll cost just over $12 one way. Of course, if you have an NC Quick Pass, those prices do come down just a bit.
And so where does all that money go? Right back to paying itself. The tolls actually fund the highway. So why isn't the northern part of 540 tolled? Well, that project was commissioned by the state before tolled roads were legalized in North Carolina.
But don't worry, you're paying for all of it. Thanks for choosing WRAL for your local news.
Our next newscast is at 10 on Fox 50 and 11 on WRAL. Have a great night.